My name is McKenna, and just an hour before my sister-in-law's wedding, I went into labor. My mother-in-law, Doris, took my phone, locked me in the bathroom, and told me to hold it in so I wouldn't ruin the bride's special day. A few hours later, I woke up in the ICU. Doris was there begging me not to press charges. She had no idea that her son, my husband, was about to destroy her entire world with a secret she never knew he had. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by family. You will want to see what happened next. The Henderson estate in Buckhead was less a home that morning and more a high-stakes movie set. It was 10 a.m. on a Saturday, and the humid Atlanta air was thick with the scent of thousands of imported white roses and the frantic sound of a string quartet tuning up. This was the wedding of the year for Atlanta's black elite, and my mother-in-law, Doris Henderson, was its imperious director. Doris, a woman who treated social status like a religion, was ensuring every detail was flawless. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a merger. My 28-year-old sister-in-law-to-be Chloe was marrying into the Thornton political dynasty. Chloe, a white lifestyle influencer who had built a career on looking vaguely stressed in beautiful locations, was currently in full bridezilla mode, clutching a mimosa as she berated a floral designer over the precise shade of a peony. I, McKenna, 32 years old and 8.5 months pregnant, was just trying to be useful. My husband, Marcus, Doris's son, was busy with the groomsmen, leaving me to navigate the chaos alone. As a marketing director for a medtech startup, I lived my life organizing chaos, so this was second nature. I saw one of the young servers looking overwhelmed, starting to place name cards on the wrong reception table. I moved carefully toward him, my hand on my swollen belly. The baby was pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe, but I wanted to help. I whispered, "Hi. I think those are for the main family table, the one near the orchestra." The server looked at me with immense relief. "Thank you, ma'am. Mrs. Henderson said she would fire me if I made a single mistake." Before I could even smile back, Chloe swept in her silk robe trailing behind her. "McKenna, oh my God, what are you doing?" She snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're confusing the staff. They have instructions. He knows what he's doing." The server winced and quickly moved away. "He looked a little lost, Chloe. You were just getting in the way." She cut me off. Her eyes raked over my simple maternity dress. "Honestly, can you please just go sit down somewhere? That whole situation," she gestured vaguely at my body, "is making the photographer's angles difficult. You look tired. You're ruining the atmosphere." Doris swooped in immediately, her diamond rings flashing as she waved a dismissive hand. "Chloe is absolutely right, McKenna." Her voice was smooth but held the unyielding edge of polished steel. "You should go rest in the library. I simply cannot have you looking pale in the family portraits. The Thorntons will be here any minute, and we must present the perfect image tonight." She stressed the word perfect, as if it were a legal requirement, which in her world it was. "I will not have them thinking this family doesn't know how to prepare for an event of this caliber. This merger, this wedding, is too important." She then turned to Chloe, her entire demeanor softening into sugary adoration. "Darling, you go finish your makeup. The photographer wants to do your bridal portraits by the fountain. Mama will handle this." Chloe shot me one last triumphant smirk before gliding away, leaving me alone with my mother-in-law. I tried to stand my ground, though I felt a familiar wave of exhaustion. "I was just trying to help Doris. The name cards were completely wrong." Doris let out a sigh, a sound of profound impatience, as if I were a child who had spilled juice on her white carpet. "McKenna, dear," she said, stepping closer. "You help by sitting still. You help by not getting in the way. Honestly, you look utterly luom thuom in that dress." She eyed my simple, elegant maternity dress with open disdain. "I told you to wear the navy blue silk. It was far more appropriate. That beige color just washes you out completely. Now please, go to the library. Don't make me ask you again." Just then, my husband Marcus walked into the foyer, all ready in his tuxedo. As a respected cardiothoracic surgeon, he always looked polished, but I could see the familiar tightness around his eyes. He had clearly caught the end of his mother's command. "Mom, come on," he said, his voice attempting authority, but landing closer to tired pleading. "She's just trying to help. She's been a huge help all week." He offered me a quick, strained smile, one I recognized instantly. It was his "please just go along with it" smile. "And I think you look beautiful, Kina. That dress is perfect." Doris didn't even turn to look at her son. She simply raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, addressing his reflection in a large, gilt-edged mirror on the wall. "Marcus, do not make me angry today. Not today of all days. I have told you I am handling this, and I have already said McKenna should not be overexerting herself." She finally turned her cold, appraising gaze back to me, ignoring her son completely. "Or perhaps you have forgotten the Thornton Gala last year? Have you forgotten what happened then?" I flinched as if she had physically struck me. How could I forget? The humiliation of that night was still a cold knot in my stomach. Doris continued, her voice rising slightly, ensuring the nearby staff could overhear. "McKenna spilled an entire tray of vintage champagne directly onto Senator Thornton's wife. Red champagne. On a white designer gown. I had to spend months repairing that relationship. We simply cannot afford another one of your clumsy incidents today, McKenna. Not with Chloe's future at stake. Everything must be perfect." My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my nails digging into my palms. I remembered that night perfectly. I remembered every sickening detail. I had been carrying 2 glasses back from the bar, navigating the crowded ballroom. Chloe, angry that Senator Thornton had spent 20 minutes praising my recent article on medtech marketing, had accidentally stuck her foot out right into my path. I stumbled and the champagne went flying. The entire room fell silent. Doris had looked at me with pure, unadulterated venom. But the worst part came later. I remembered Marcus pulling me into an alcove, his grip painfully tight on my arm. "Just apologize, Kina," he'd hissed, his eyes darting around to see who was watching. "Don't make a scene. Just say you're sorry. You know how Mom gets about the Thorntons." So I had. I had stood there, humiliated, and apologized profusely to Chloe and Mrs. Thornton for my clumsiness. I had taken the blame for Chloe's malice, all to keep the peace. All to protect Marcus from his own mother's wrath. And here he was offering the same weak, meaningless defense. His words, "I think you look beautiful," weren't a defense at all. They were just another way of saying, "Please, McKenna, just do what she says so my life can be easier." I did as I was told. I went to the library and sat on a stiff antique chair for nearly an hour, listening to the muffled sounds of the string quartet warming up outside and the rising pitch of Chloe's laughter from the bridal suite down the hall. Finally, I couldn't sit still any longer. I needed to use the restroom, and I wanted to avoid the main hallway, which was now bustling with arriving guests. I slipped out the library's side door and went to the small guest bathroom tucked away under the grand staircase. It was 1 o'clock, exactly 1 hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. I was washing my hands, staring at my tired reflection in the ornate mirror, when the first pain hit. It wasn't a contraction. It was a sharp, brutal cramp low in my back, so intense it made my knees buckle. I gripped the cold marble sink, my breath catching in my throat. I tried to straighten up, telling myself it was just a normal ache from carrying so much weight. But as I did, a second, more violent spasm seized me. And then I felt it. A sudden, unmistakable gush of warm liquid running down my legs, soaking my dress, and pooling on the pristine white floor tiles. I looked down in absolute terror. It couldn't be. It was too soon. My due date was 6 weeks away. "No," I whispered to my reflection, my heart hammering against my ribs. "No, not now. Please, not now." As if in answer, the first real contraction ripped through my abdomen. It was nothing like the gentle Braxton Hicks I had experienced. This was a blinding, all-consuming pain that stole my breath and sent a wave of dizziness through me. I collapsed against the wall, my hand instinctively flying to my stomach, which was now rock hard. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my system. This was real. The baby was coming. Now. I had to find Marcus. I had to get to a hospital. I pushed the bathroom door open, my whole body trembling. The hallway was empty. The music from the garden was louder here, a cheerful, mocking melody. I had to find Marcus. He was a doctor. He would know what to do. He would get me to the hospital. I moved down the hall, one hand clutching my stomach as another contraction began to build. Marcus, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I peered into the chaotic main hall, but he wasn't there. I saw Chloe posing for a photo, laughing. I saw my father-in-law talking with Senator Thornton. But no Marcus. My eyes darted to the bridal dressing room, a large suite just off the main hall. The door was slightly ajar. Maybe Marcus was in there. I pushed the door open, breathless. Marcus? But it wasn't my husband. It was Doris. She was alone, standing in the center of the room, which was filled with towering stacks of gifts wrapped in silver and white. She was running a critical eye over the gift table, repositioning a large Tiffany box just slightly to the left. She hadn't heard me. Mother! I gasped, leaning heavily against the ornate doorframe. The pain was sharp now, stealing my breath. Doris turned her face, a mask of social annoyance, clearly irritated by the interruption. McKenna, I told you to. I think I'm in labor. I rushed out, the words tumbling over each other. My water broke. I pointed down at the dark, spreading stain on my beige dress, my voice breaking with panic. I'm having contractions. It's happening now. I watched her face. The socialite smile vanished. For a split second, I saw genuine shock. Her eyes widened. Her mouth fell open. But just as quickly, the shock was gone, replaced by something I had never seen directed at me before. It was pure, cold, reptilian anger. Her eyes narrowed, her perfectly painted lips pressing into a thin, furious line. She took a step toward me, her voice low and menacing. No. I blinked, confused by the single word. No, what? What do you mean, no? I need to go to the hospital. I need to call Marcus. Doris shook her head, a small, tight motion. No, not now. She hissed, her eyes darting toward the hallway as if to check if anyone was listening. You will not do this. You will not ruin your sister-in-law's wedding. Her words were so cold, so void of humanity that I couldn't process them. I fumbled in the pocket of my maternity dress, my fingers desperately searching for my phone. I have to call Marcus, I stammered, pulling it out. He's a doctor. He'll know. Before I could even unlock the screen, Doris's hand shot out like a viper. She snatched the phone from my grasp, her grip so tight her knuckles turned white. Her eyes were blazing. You will not, she seethed, ruin Chloe's day. Do you have any idea what this wedding means? The Thorntons have spent $1 million on this event. This is about our family's future, our standing. This is not about your little inconvenience. Inconvenience? I gasped, as another contraction, sharper this time, radiated from my back and wrapped around my abdomen like a band of fire. I nearly buckled, grabbing onto the gift table to keep myself upright. The Tiffany box wobbled dangerously. Mother, I pleaded, my voice breaking. This isn't panic. I'm in labor. I am having a baby right now. Doris didn't even flinch at my pain. She simply pocketed my phone. Then you will hold it in. You are a strong woman, McKenna. I've always said that. You just need to breathe deeply. Think about something else. Think about the family. Think about how devastated Chloe would be if you turned her perfect day into a medical sideshow. All those important guests, the senator. It's just unthinkable. The sheer audacity of her request, the absolute cruelty, left me speechless. She was telling me to hold in childbirth. As I struggled to find the words to fight back, another wave of pain crashed over me, forcing me to my knees. The cold marble floor was a shock against my skin. Please, I begged, looking up at the woman who was my husband's mother, the grandmother of my child. Please, I'm not joking. I am in real pain. Give me my phone. I need to call a doctor. I need Marcus. Doris's eyes darted around the room, settling on the heavy, solid oak door of the ensuite bathroom. This is what you're going to do, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as if she were solving a minor scheduling conflict. You're going to go into this bathroom. You're going to sit on the floor, breathe, and be quiet. You just need to hold on for a few hours. That's all. Just until after the ceremony and the main photographs. I stared at her in disbelief, the pain of another contraction making me dizzy. Hold on. Mother, this is a baby. It's not a business meeting you can reschedule. I need a hospital. And you will get one. She snapped, her patience gone. After. You will not steal Chloe's spotlight. You will not turn this entire day into the Machina has a baby show. I forbid it. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep, and hauled me to my feet. I was surprised by her strength, but I was so weak from the pain and shock that I stumbled, barely able to stay upright. No, please, I begged, trying to pull away, but my resistance was feeble. Get in, she ordered, pushing me roughly through the bathroom doorway. I fell against the vanity, my hip hitting the marble edge. The room was opulent, all gold fixtures and more marble, but it felt like a prison cell. Mother, you can't, I cried out, turning back, but she was already pulling the door shut. Doris, please don't do this. I lunged for the handle, but it was too late. I heard the unmistakable metallic click of a key turning in the lock from the outside. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a simple button lock I could undo. She had used a key. She had planned this. Mother, I screamed, pounding on the heavy wood door with both fists. Let me out! What are you doing? Let me out of here, I'm in labor. Doris. I could hear her footsteps moving away, muffled. The door was thick, soundproofed. Help! I screamed again, rattling the handle uselessly. Somebody help me! She locked me in! She locked me in! I was trapped, my baby was coming, and my mother-in-law had locked me in a bathroom, leaving me to face it alone. I hammered on the door until my fists ached, my throat raw from screaming. The thick wood muffled everything, turning my desperate cries into dull, heavy thuds. Let me out, please, somebody! Marcus! I shouted, rattling the locked handle again and again. Another contraction seized me, and I slid down the door, gasping, pressing my forehead against the cool wood. It was no use. No one could hear me. Then through the door I heard the faint sound of the dressing room door opening again, followed by my sister-in-law's voice. Chloe. What was all that pounding, Mom? She asked. Her voice was sharp, annoyed. Is everything okay? Where did Makina go? There was a pause. I held my breath, listening, praying Chloe would show some decency. Then came Doris's voice, as smooth and calm as if she were discussing the weather. Oh, it's nothing, darling. Just Makina being overly dramatic as usual. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear. She started feeling a bit overwhelmed by the pregnancy. You know how she gets. I simply suggested she take a moment to rest and compose herself in the bathroom. She's always trying to make everything about her. A beat of silence. And then Chloe laughed. It wasn't a big laugh, just a short, dismissive, figures. It was a sound of complicity, of shared amusement. That laugh was a betrayal, almost as sharp as the turning of the key. She knew. She knew I was in here, and she didn't care. Now stop worrying about her, Doris said, her voice bright and final. You look breathtaking. The Thorntons are waiting. Your future is waiting. Go, darling, go get married. I heard the rustle of Chloe's dress as she presumably left the room. I was alone again. A few moments later, a new sound filtered through the walls, faint but unmistakable. The opening notes of Canon in D, played by a string quartet. The bridal march. The ceremony was starting. They were walking down the aisle. They had actually left me here. I was trapped in premature labor, while the family I had tried so hard to be a part of celebrated just a few 100 feet away, completely indifferent to my suffering. I was in every sense of the word abandoned. I lay on the cold Italian marble floor for how long I don't know. Time seemed to warp and stretch. The floor tiles were shockingly cold against my cheek, a stark contrast to the fire ripping through my abdomen. Outside, the world continued without me. I could hear the faint muffled sound of applause from the garden, followed by the indistinct murmur of someone giving a speech over a microphone. The ceremony was over. They were married. They were celebrating. Another contraction seized me stronger than the last. I cried out, my voice sounding thin in the acoustically dead space of the bathroom. I timed it on the small watch on my wrist. 7 minutes since the last one. No, closer to 5. They were coming faster. Help! I screamed again, dragging myself up by the gilded sink faucet. Please, somebody let me out! I pounded on the thick oak door with the heels of my hands, but the sound was absorbed almost instantly. The music outside had changed, shifting from elegant classical strings to upbeat jazz. The party was starting. My screams were just useless noise swallowed by the celebration. I looked for any way out. The door handle wouldn't budge, the lock was solid. There was a window, a tall, narrow pane of frosted glass set high up the wall for privacy. I dragged a heavy velvet stool over and climbed onto it, my body shaking with effort and pain. I reached for the latch, but it was locked tight with a key I didn't have. Even if I could open it, it only led to a small, enclosed ventilation shaft. There was no escape. I was completely, utterly trapped. The baby was coming, and I was alone, locked in a bathroom while my family laughed and drank champagne just outside. Another contraction, a vice grip of agony, forced me back to the cold marble floor. I curled into a ball, panting, the smell of Chloe's expensive gardenia perfume hanging heavy in the air. As the pain receded, a memory flooded my mind, sharp and humiliating. It was from a year ago at a formal family dinner right here in this house. I had just secured the first round of seed funding for my medtech startup. I was so proud. My company was developing an app to help coordinate care for chronically ill patients, a project born from watching my own grandmother struggle with disorganized medical appointments. I remember my hands shaking slightly as I presented my business plan to Doris and Marcus's father, hoping they might see the value, maybe even offer to invest. Marcus's father had looked intrigued, but Doris cut the conversation short with a brittle laugh. I can still hear her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, Makina, that's just adorable," she'd said, tapping her painted fingernail against her wine glass. "Your little app? It's a sweet hobby." "It's not a hobby, Mother," I'd insisted, my face burning. "It's a viable business. We've already secured $500,000 in funding." "Please," she interrupted. "The Henderson family money invests in tangible assets, real estate, blue-chip stocks, things that are solid. We don't throw our legacy away on apps and clouds and whatever other momong you're playing with." She'd turned to Marcus. "Darling, pass the asparagus. McKenna's business is giving me a headache." I had looked at Marcus, then pleading with my eyes for him to say something to defend my work, to validate my passion. He just cleared his throat, looked down at his plate, and picked up the asparagus dish. "More asparagus, Mom?" he'd asked, as if I hadn't just been dismissed. His silence that night was a betrayal, a small cut that I now realized was part of a much larger, deeper wound. He had never seen my career as equal to his, just as his mother had never seen me as equal to them. I tried to push the memory away, as another contraction peaked, forcing a low groan from my lips. I shifted, trying to find a less painful position on the hard floor, my cheek pressed against the cold tile. The memory of Doris's face, twisted in disgust at the Thornton Gala, swam before my eyes. That night, it hadn't just been Marcus's silence. It was Doris's immediate, calculated cruelty. I remembered it so clearly now. I was navigating the crowded ballroom, holding 2 glasses of champagne, trying to rejoin Marcus and his parents. Chloe, who had been furious all night because Senator Thornton had spent 20 minutes praising a recent medical tech article I'd co-authored, was standing with a group of friends. As I passed, she, accidentally, stuck her foot out, a quick, subtle movement that was perfectly timed. I stumbled, my feet tangling. The champagne went flying. It was a disaster. The red liquid arced through the air, splashing directly onto Mrs. Thornton's pristine white silk gown. The music seemed to stop. Everyone turned to stare. I was mortified, apologizing profusely as I grabbed napkins. Doris didn't rush over to help. She didn't ask if I was okay. She marched over her face, a mask of cold fury. "What is wrong with you?" She hissed, her voice low but piercing. "This is a vintage gown, Makina. You are embarrassing this family in front of the senator." She grabbed my arm and practically dragged me toward the powder room, leaving Marcus to stammer apologies to the Thorntons. Later, I tried to explain to Marcus that I thought Chloe had tripped me on purpose. He'd just sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Kana, please," he'd said. "Chloe wouldn't do that. You were probably just nervous. Just let it go. Mom is already furious." Doris had protected Chloe's malice, reframing it as my incompetence. It was never about the truth. It was always about protecting the family image. And in that image, Chloe was flawless, and I was the liability, the outsider, the one who always made a mess. I tried to push myself up from the floor, but a wave of dizziness made the room spin. The contractions were closer now, barely minutes apart. And then a new sensation. A sharp, tearing pain that felt different from the labor. It felt wrong. I looked down. Blood. There was blood on the white marble floor, bright red and far too much. This wasn't just labor. Something was terribly wrong. I knew it with a chilling certainty. This was a placental abruption. I'd read about it. The baby was in danger. I was in danger. All thoughts of dignity or keeping the peace vanished, replaced by raw, primal terror. "Help!" I screamed, pounding on the locked door with the heel of my shoe. "Somebody please, I'm bleeding my baby." I could hear the party outside, the thumping bass line of Uptown Funk vibrating through the walls. They were dancing. They were celebrating. My voice was nothing against the sound of their joy. I was bleeding out, locked in a bathroom, and they were dancing. "Marcus." I shrieked his name, one last desperate attempt. "Marcus, please!" The pain was overwhelming, a tidal wave that pulled me under. The room began to go gray at the edges. My limbs felt heavy, my body too weak to fight anymore. I slumped against the door, my bloody hand sliding down the smooth wood, leaving a streak of red. My last conscious thought was of my son. My baby. I had tried to protect him, and I had failed. The darkness finally took me, and the sound of the party, the music, the laughter, all of it faded into a blessed, terrifying silence. The reception was in full swing. The string quartet had been replaced by a 9-piece band playing Earth, Wind, and Fire. Champagne towers sparkled under the massive tent, and hundreds of guests mingled on the perfectly manicured lawn. Marcus finally extricated himself from a conversation with one of Senator Thornton's aides, his groomsman duties officially complete. He scanned the crowd for McKenna, a knot of guilt still settled in his stomach from that morning. He had seen his mother's cold dismissal of her, had seen McKenna's face fall when he offered only a weak defense. He told himself he'd make it up to her. He'd find her, get her a plate of food, and tell her how beautiful she looked, even if she hadn't worn the navy blue dress. But he couldn't see her. He checked the main tables, the dance floor, the patio. No McKenna. A familiar flicker of annoyance sparked in his chest. She was probably upset. She was probably back in their hotel room, angry that he hadn't stood up to his mother more forcefully. He loved his wife, he truly did, but her sensitivity around his family was exhausting sometimes. Couldn't she just let it go for one night? For Chloe's wedding? He pulled out his phone, sighing, and dialed her number. He was already rehearsing the conversation. "Kina, where are you? You can't just leave. Mom's just being mom." But the call didn't go through. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached McKenna." He frowned. That was strange. Her phone was never off. She was meticulous about keeping it charged, especially this late in her pregnancy. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. A new, sharper feeling began to cut through his annoyance. Worry. Where was she? She wouldn't just leave without her phone. He walked back inside the main house, checking the library where his mother had told her to wait. The room was empty. He checked the kitchen. Just busy caterers. He checked the upstairs guest rooms. All empty. He stood in the grand foyer, the sound of the party outside suddenly seeming distant and muffled. His wife was missing. He spotted them on the main lawn holding court near the towering ice sculpture fountain. Doris and Chloe were standing with the Thornton family, all of them laughing at something Senator Thornton had said. They looked like a magazine spread the picture of powerful, influential families merging. Chloe in her $50,000 gown looked radiant. Doris looked triumphant. Marcus strode across the grass, his anxiety overriding social graces. He didn't wait for a pause in the conversation. "Mom," he interrupted, his voice tight. "Mom, where is Makina? I can't find her anywhere." Doris's smile faltered for just a second, a flicker of annoyance at being interrupted in front of her new, powerful in-laws. She turned to him, placing a hand on his arm, a gesture of maternal concern that was purely for show. "Marcus, darling, not now," she whispered, her voice tight. "We're speaking with the senator." "I don't care," he hissed back, his voice low. "Her phone is off. She's not in the hotel. Where is she?" Doris's expression hardened. She pulled him a few feet away from the group, her smile still plastered on for the benefit of the Thorntons. "Honestly, Marcus, your wife has the most dramatic timing. She came to me an hour ago, said she had a splitting headache from all the excitement. She was being quite difficult about it, frankly." "What are you talking about, a headache?" "Yes," Doris said with an exasperated sigh. "She said she was going back to the hotel to lie down. She just left, in the middle of the reception. Can you imagine how rude? But you know Makina. She's not built for this kind of social pressure. She just behaves like a child." Chloe drifted over, linking her arm with his, her champagne glass still in hand. "She's right, Marcus. Don't worry about it." Her voice was syrupy sweet. "To be honest, I think she was just jealous of all the attention. She looked green all morning. She probably just went home to sulk. This is our day. Don't let her ruin it. Now come on, Dad Thornton wants a picture with his new son-in-law." Marcus looked from his sister's bright, unbothered face to his mother's dismissive one. Her story made sense. Sort of. McKenna did hate these events. She did get overwhelmed. But to leave without her phone, to leave without telling him, it felt wrong. Deeply wrong. He tried to force down the irritation, but the worry was now a cold, metallic taste in his mouth. He knew his wife. He knew her better than anyone. McKenna was meticulous. She was responsible. She was also 8.5 months pregnant. She would never just leave a chaotic event, get in a cab, and turn off her phone without telling him. Even at the height of their worst arguments, she was a communicator. She would send a text. She would leave a note. She would not just vanish. His heart started to hammer a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He pulled out his own phone again, this time checking their joint credit card account. He had set up alerts for it. He scrolled through the recent charges. The florist. The band deposit. The final payment to the caterer. All expected. But there was no Uber charge, no Lyft charge, no charge from any local taxi service. So she hadn't taken a car. He looked around the grand estate, the laughter and music from the reception tent suddenly sounding sinister. If she hadn't taken a car, then she was still here. But where? And why was her phone off? He looked back at his mother and sister, now happily posing for photos with the Thorntons, their laughter bright and effortless. A dark, ugly thought, a wisp of a suspicion he'd never allowed himself to form, began to take shape in his mind. Then he remembered. His father, his late father, a brilliant and pragmatic man, had always had a complex relationship with Doris. He loved her, but he was not blind to her obsessive, controlling nature. Years ago, after a valuable painting had gone missing, only to be found in Chloe's dorm room, his father had taken him aside. He had led Marcus to his private study, a room Doris rarely entered, and showed him the discreet state-of-the-art security system he'd had installed. It was separate from the main house alarm. The hard drive was hidden. The cameras were tiny, integrated into the architecture of the main rooms. "Your mother has a blind spot when it comes to appearances, Marcus," his father had said, his voice grim. "And she has a blind spot for Chloe. I trust you. You are the only one I trust to be level-headed if things ever go sideways. This is our insurance policy. Only you have this password." Marcus had never thought to use it. Until now. He ran to his father's study, locking the door behind him. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely type the password. The secure server whirred to life, displaying a grid of camera feeds from all over the estate. He clicked on the feed for the bridal dressing room. The room was empty now, a silent testament to the party outside. He grabbed the mouse and scrubbed the timeline back to just before the ceremony around 1 p.m. And there it was. He watched his blood turning to ice. He saw McKenna stumble into the room, her face pale, her hand on her stomach. He saw her plead with his mother. He watched frozen in horror as his own mother, Doris, snatched the phone from McKenna's hand. He saw her berate his wife. He saw McKenna double over in pain. And then he saw the unimaginable. He saw Doris grab McKenna by the arm, drag her, and physically shove her into the ensuite bathroom. He saw his mother pull a key from her pocket, lock the door from the outside, and then calmly straighten her dress. He watched the timestamp as she left the room. He fast-forwarded. 1 hour passed. 2. 3. The party started outside. No one went to the door. The door remained closed. He fast-forwarded to the present. The door was still locked. She was still in there. He didn't make a sound. The rage that filled him was so cold and total, it burned away all panic. He stood up, walked out of the study, and sprinted down the main hall. A server carrying a tray of champagne stepped into his path. Marcus didn't slow down. He shoved the man aside, sending glasses shattering across the floor. He didn't hear the crash. He didn't hear the gasps from the guests. He burst into the bridal suite, which was now empty of people, but full of discarded gift bags. He ran to the locked bathroom door and kicked it. The wood splintered, but the lock held. He kicked it again, putting his entire weight into it. The frame shattered and the door flew open. She was on the floor, unconscious in a pool of blood, her skin a terrifying waxy gray. He forgot how to breathe. For 1 second he was just a husband. Then the surgeon took over. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying, dialing 911. His voice was not a scream. It was a cold, terrifying command that cut through the sound of the party outside. "This is Dr. Marcus Henderson. I need an ambulance at the Henderson estate in Buckhead immediately. I have a 34-week pregnant female, unresponsive, severe blood loss, suspected placental abruption. She was found locked in a bathroom, pulseless." He knelt beside her, starting compressions, his mind a whirlwind of medical protocols. He was about to follow the paramedics as they rushed her out, but he stopped. The evidence. He sprinted back to his father's study, his heart pounding. He jammed his personal USB drive into the server, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He copied the video file, the entire damning record. He ripped the drive out, shoved it deep into his pocket, and ran to save his wife. The ambulance bay doors at Northside Atlanta Hospital exploded open. Paramedics rushed the gurney through their movements, fast and desperate. Marcus ran beside them, still in his blood-stained tuxedo, his mind a roaring void of panic and medical terminology. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room were blinding, reflecting off the polished floors. 32-year-old female, G1, P0, 34 weeks gestation, a paramedic shouted, rattling off her vitals. Found unresponsive, locked in a bathroom. Suspected placental abruption with severe hemorrhaging. BP is 80/40 and dropping. Fetal heart rate is intermittent. A team of doctors and nurses converged on the gurney, a whirlwind of blue scrubs. A sharp-faced woman with commanding eyes took charge. Her name tag read Dr. Imani. She shone a light in McKenna's unblinking eyes, her expression grim. "She's in hypovolemic shock," Dr. Imani ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Get 2 large-bore IVs in her now. Type and cross for 6 units of ONEG. We need to move. Now. This baby has to come out." "That's my wife," Marcus choked out, grabbing Dr. Imani's arm. "McKenna, I'm a surgeon here. I'm Dr. Henderson." Dr. Imani looked at him, her gaze softening for just a fraction of a second before hardening again with professional resolve. "Dr. Henderson, your wife needs an emergency C-section this instant, or we will lose them both. She has lost a critical amount of blood. We have no time." She turned and ran with the gurney as they pushed it toward the operating theaters. "Prepare or three," she yelled. "Get pediatric AINS and NICU down here stat." Marcus ran with them, his mind screaming. This wasn't happening. This was the nightmare scenario every doctor, every husband dreads. He saw the gurney slam through the double doors marked operating room, authorized personnel only. He surged forward, his medical instincts overriding everything. "I'm coming in." A large surgical nurse physically blocked his path, planting a firm hand on his chest. "No, doctor. You can't. You're the husband. You know the protocol. You have to wait out here." "But I'm a surgeon," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "She's my wife." "Which is exactly why you can't be in there," the nurse said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Let them do their jobs. You need to let them work." The double doors swung shut with a pneumatic hiss, leaving him alone in the sterile, silent hallway. The adrenaline that had propelled him from the house, that had fueled his frantic run through the hospital, vanished, leaving him impossibly heavy. His legs gave out. He stumbled to the nearest row of hard plastic waiting room chairs and collapsed, his body folding in on itself. He dropped his head into his hands, the bloody dried smear from McKenna's floor sticky on his skin. He had saved lives in this very hospital. He had held hearts in his hands, but he had never ever felt this powerless. He sat there, a surgeon in a ruined tuxedo, as the woman he loved and his unborn child fought for their lives, all because his mother had wanted a perfect party. It felt like a lifetime had passed. The frantic energy of the emergency bay had given way to the agonizing, sterile quiet of the surgical waiting room, and now to the suffocating silence outside the NICU. Marcus sat hunched over, his elbows on his knees, his tuxedo trousers still stained with his wife's blood. He had refused to change. He couldn't move. He just stared at the double doors, praying for a sign. Every beep from the monitors inside felt like a hammer blow to his chest. He was a surgeon. He understood the language of these machines, and the frantic rhythms he'd heard earlier had terrified him. Finally, the doors hissed open, and Dr. Imani stepped out. She looked exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled, her mask hanging limply around her neck. Marcus shot to his feet, his entire body trembling. Is she? Dr. Imani met his gaze directly, her eyes weary but compassionate. "Your wife is alive, Dr. Henderson. She is past the immediate crisis." Marcus nearly collapsed with relief, grabbing the back of a chair to steady himself. "Oh, thank God. And the baby?" "McKenna is in surgical recovery." Dr. Imani continued, her tone measured, pulling him back from the edge of his relief. "She is stable, but I need you to understand how serious this was. She lost a critical amount of blood. We had to give her multiple transfusions. She is very, very weak and will require close monitoring in the ICU for at least the next 24 hours. Marcus nodded, his medical mind processing the words. "I understand. Thank you. And our son?" Dr. Imani's professional mask wavered for a moment. She took a small breath. "You have a son. But Marcus, he's in critical condition. The placental abruption was severe. He was deprived of oxygen for a significant period before your 911 call. He suffered severe asphyxia." The medical term hit Marcus harder than any physical blow. Severe asphyxia. He knew what that meant. Brain damage, long-term complications, if he survived at all. "We are doing everything we can," Dr. Imani said gently, seeing the devastation on his face. "We have him on a cooling protocol to try and mitigate any brain injury, and he's on a ventilator. He is a fighter, Marcus. He is already fighting. But the next 48 hours are critical." Marcus leaned his head against the wall, the world tilting. His mother had done this. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice. As if reading his thoughts, Dr. Imani added one more piece of information. There's something else you need to know. Detective Hayes from the Atlanta Police Department is here. He's waiting in the family room. Police, Marcus said numbly. Yes, Dr. Imani confirmed. Your statements on the 911 call, specifically that your wife was locked in a room and imprisoned, combined with the severity of her injuries, automatically triggered a mandatory report from our end. The hospital has officially filed this as a potential criminal investigation. The double doors to the main waiting area swung open, announcing the arrival of Doris and Chloe. They were still dressed in their luxurious wedding attire. Chloe wore her $50,000 gown, now slightly wrinkled, and Doris was in her custom silk suit and diamond jewelry. They looked utterly out of place in the sterile, silent environment, like exotic birds who had flown into a freezer. They found Marcus immediately standing stiffly next to a tall man in a dark suit who was leaning in, speaking quietly. The man wore a badge clipped to his belt. Detective Hayes. Doris stopped dead, her eyes widening as she recognized the official presence. Chloe looked confused and annoyed. Marcus turned his face void of any emotion, his eyes fixed on his mother. Detective Hayes concluded his sentence to Marcus and turned to Doris and Chloe. Mrs. Henderson, Miss Henderson. Doris rushed forward, her veneer of composure completely shattering, replaced by sheer naked panic. Detective, she began, her voice already cracking. I am so sorry for the misunderstanding. My son has had a terrible shock. He must have misspoken on the phone. Detective Hayes ignored her interruption, addressing Marcus calmly. Sir, based on your own sworn testimony during the 911 call and the clinical evidence from the emergency room staff, we have reason to believe your wife was illegally imprisoned by a family member. We are officially opening an investigation. Doris's breath hitched. She spun back to Marcus, grabbing his arm so tightly her nails dug into his skin. Marcus, stop them. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I only locked the door because I thought she was just having a panic attack. I thought she needed to rest. McKenna said she was in labor and needed a doctor. Marcus said, his voice flat. He didn't pull his arm away, but his gaze was unwavering. I didn't know it was real labor, Doris shrieked, looking desperately between Marcus and the detective. She was 6 weeks early. Who would have known that? Who would have guessed? I just told her to hold off for a while so that she didn't steal Chloe's spotlight. I thought she was just being dramatic. Everybody knows McKenna is dramatic. She wrung her hands. I didn't know it was real. I didn't know, I swear it. You have to believe me. I didn't know she would go into labor for real. Chloe, meanwhile, was looking at the detective, her annoyance returning. This is ridiculous. All this drama over a misunderstanding. Mom just wanted to protect the ceremony. It's not a crime. We believe your wife was being dramatic, Doris continued, her voice gaining a desperate strength. She always makes things worse than they are. I just told her to calm down and relax. Who would think the baby was coming? I didn't know. I swear it. This is all a misunderstanding. You have to believe me, please. She looked directly at Detective Hayes, pleading for her perfect image to be restored. You have to believe me. I just wanted my daughter's day to be perfect, that's all. The transition from the freezing blackness of unconsciousness back to the searing white of the hospital room was brutal. McKenna opened her eyes immediately, assaulted by the bright lights, the steady rhythm of the monitors, and the dull, persistent ache of her body. Tubes ran into her arm. Her abdomen felt heavy and tight from the emergency C-section. The first thought that registered was not the pain but the silence. Where was her baby? She tried to speak, to ask the nurse who was checking her vitals, but all that emerged was a weak, dry rasp. A figure blurred into her field of vision. It was Doris. Her elaborate wedding gown was wrinkled, her makeup smeared, but the diamonds still caught the light. When Doris saw McKenna's eyes fluttering open, she bypassed the nurse and the police officer, rushing straight to the bedside. McKenna, Doris whispered, her voice high and desperate, grabbing McKenna's hand. Oh, my love, thank God. You're awake. Listen to me, please. You have to listen. Doris leaned in, her voice frantic, heavy with the stench of fear. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell the police you misunderstood. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know you would go into labor. You have to tell them that you don't want to press charges. Please, don't sue me. Don't do this to our family. You can't do this to Marcus. She was begging. The grand imperious Doris was reduced to a sniveling, desperate woman pleading for her image to be saved. Think of the scandal. You can't ruin us. Marcus will never forgive you if you ruin the family name with this criminal nonsense. Please, McKenna, my love, say something. Say it was an accident. Say you forgive me. McKenna stared up at the woman who had locked her in a room to bleed. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell the police officer everything. But her throat was too dry, her body too broken. She had no words. She could only stare at Doris with wide, empty eyes, her silence a profound, unyielding rejection. Doris mistook the silence for weakness, for compliance. She gripped McKenna's hand tighter, her diamonds pressing painfully into her skin. Thank you, darling. I knew you'd understand. She released McKenna's hand and spun around, seeing Marcus, standing stone-faced in the doorway with Officer Hayes. Marcus, she demanded, her voice regaining a thread of its old authority. Tell the officer, tell him your wife is recovering and this is settled. Tell him to drop the charges. This is a family matter. We will resolve this internally. That's right, Chloe chirped, entering the room behind Marcus. Mom just needs to buy her a nicer crib and this is over. Tell them, Marcus. Tell them to leave. Doris fixed her gaze on Marcus, willing him to take control, to stop the investigation, to restore the false peace of their family. Tell them, Marcus, this is your chance. We will resolve this internally. The recovery room was cramped and suffocatingly silent despite the 6 people crowded inside. The fluorescent hospital light glared off Chloe's $50,000 wedding gown and the expensive diamonds weighing down Doris's wrists. McKenna lay in the center of the chaos, her skin pale against the white sheets, her eyes open and clear, watching them all. Officer Hayes stood near the foot of the bed, his presence a stark, unrelenting reminder of the charges pending. Doris stood closest to the bed, her face puffy and stained with calculated tears. She wasn't looking at McKenna, but rather pleading desperately at Marcus, who stood by the window, his shoulders rigid. Marcus, please look at me, Doris implored, wringing her hands. Me da Jaroy. I've been under so much pressure. I was so exhausted from organizing this entire wedding. I was simply too stressed. She lowered her voice to a dramatic, pleading whisper. I just wanted everything to be perfect. That was my only crime. Stress and wanting perfection. You know I love McKenna. I never meant any real harm. I was just overly protective of Chloe's day. Chloe's husband Thomas leaned against the wall, his tuxedo jacket wrinkled. He looked not worried about McKenna, but furious about his ruined wedding day. Chloe stood next to him, her bridal veil discarded, her arms crossed openly, glaring at McKenna. Doris continued her monologue, performing solely for the benefit of the police officer and Thomas. Please, Marcus, my baby, you have to tell them that this is resolved. I'm just her mother. I was trying to protect our family from an embarrassing scene. I was worried the pregnancy stress made her hysterical. I made a mistake, yes, but not a criminal one. I've already suffered enough. Marcus remained silent for a long, terrible moment, letting his mother's gaslighting fill the room, letting the desperation of the situation sink into McKenna's mind. He looked down at his wife, whose strength was already returning to her eyes. He finally pushed himself off the windowsill and walked slowly toward the center of the room. Every eye followed him. He looked directly at Officer Hayes. My wife is not going to press charges against my mother. Marcus stated, his voice clear and devoid of all emotion. Doris gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes instantly shining with triumphant relief. A small, cruel smile started to form on Chloe's face. Oh, thank you, my son, Doris cried, rushing forward and trying to embrace him. I knew it. I knew she was reasonable. I knew she was a good wife. I knew she'd understand. She's always the reasonable one. We can fix this now. We can put this ugly mess behind us. Doris rushed forward, her hands reaching for Marcus, her eyes shining with triumphant tears. I knew it, she cried, attempting to hug him. I knew she wouldn't ruin the family. See, Officer Hayes, it's settled. McKenna is a reasonable woman. This is a private matter. Marcus sidestepped her embrace, his tuxedo jacket rustling. His face remained a mask of cold, unyielding resolve. He did not look at Doris. He looked at the police officer, Detective Hayes. My wife is recovering, Detective, Marcus stated, his voice flat and authoritative, cutting through Doris's chatter. And she is not pressing charges. He paused, letting the silence settle. Because I am. Doris froze mid-step. The air seemed to hiss out of her lungs. Her expression, moments ago smug with relief, turned to ash. Chloe, watching nearby, gasped. I am pressing charges, Marcus repeated, looking now at his mother. Against my mother, Doris Henderson. Officer, I want her charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, and aggravated assault on my pregnant wife, and contributing to the severe endangerment of my son. Doris staggered back, clutching her chest. Her eyes were wide terror finally overcoming her arrogance. Marcus, you are insane. You are hysterical. What are you talking about? You have no proof. That is just the word of an emotional woman against mine. You want proof, Mother? Marcus asked, reaching deep into his tuxedo pocket. He pulled out a small black USB drive. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger, a tiny, devastating weapon. Do you remember the security system Dad installed, the one he never told you about? The one that records every main room in this house, including the bridal suite? Doris's face went a sickly, terrifying shade of white. I have the video, Mother, Marcus continued, his voice absolutely devoid of emotion. I have the entire recording. I have the sound. I have the video of you snatching her phone. I have the visual of you shoving her into that bathroom. He looked at Detective Hayes. I have my mother's voice clearly stating that she was forcing my wife to hold it in so she wouldn't ruin Chloe's party. I have the sound of my wife screaming and pounding on the door, and I have my mother's calm voice telling Chloe that McKenna just needed to rest when she was bleeding out on the floor. It's all here, Detective. Every minute of kidnapping and reckless endangerment recorded by the man she so desperately wanted to impress. Chloe let out a high-pitched, raw shriek that cut through the silence of the recovery room. She didn't scream a defense for her mother. She screamed for herself. What is that? She shrieked, her hands flying to her mouth, her perfect wedding dress suddenly looking cheap and inappropriate. You can't have that. That's fake. It has to be fake. Thomas, Chloe's new husband, who had been leaning against the wall, sprang upright. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at Chloe, his eyes widening in pure cold realization. You knew about this, he demanded, his voice dangerously low. Chloe, tell me you did not know about this. Tell me you did not know she was locked in there. Chloe stammered frantically, trying to find the narrative that would save her perfect life. I didn't. I didn't know. I thought Mom was joking. I thought McKenna was just throwing a fit. I swear it, Thomas. I swear I thought it was a joke. Her denial was weak, transparent. The memory of her laughter outside the bathroom door was still ringing in McKenna's ears. Doris, seeing her last line of defense collapse, launched into a final, desperate act of emotional warfare, ignoring the police officer completely. Marcus! She wailed, staggering forward and grabbing his arm. You can't do this to your mother. I am your flesh and blood. You can't put your mother in prison. This family has spent decades building this name. You are going to destroy us all for a clumsy girl who couldn't even deliver her baby properly. She pounded his chest with her fist, the force barely registering on his frame. I love you. I love your sister. You can't let your wife, who already ruined Chloe's day, ruin the entire Henderson legacy. You can't. Marcus remained a pillar of stone, allowing his mother's rage to wash over him. Then he grabbed both of her wrists and squeezed. You ruined it, Mother. You didn't just ruin a party. You broke the law. You risked the lives of my wife and my son for a photo opportunity with the Thorntons. You chose your image over your family's lives. He shoved her hands away, stepping back so the police officer could easily intervene. You are not my family's priority anymore, Mother. My wife is my family. My son is my family. And you already threw them away when you turned that key. You are not protecting us. You are protecting your vanity. But Marcus! Doris screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. I'm your mother. You can't abandon your own mother. You abandoned McKenna, Mother. Marcus said, his voice flat, devoid of the love and warmth she craved. You destroyed it when you locked that door. You broke the law, and now you will face the consequences. Chloe rushed forward, attempting to block Marcus from reaching the police officer. Her eyes were wide and frantic, her $50,000 wedding gown now looking like a crumpled prison uniform. Marcus, please don't do this. Think, she screamed. The wedding, the insurance, the Thorntons, our future. You can't let her ruin everything because you're angry. You have to stop this. You have to save the family name. Marcus looked at his sister, his gaze cold and completely unmoved. You want to talk about saving the family name, Chloe? You want to talk about the Thorntons and the family legacy? You want to talk about appearances? He dismissed her plea with a sharp, brutal shake of his head. You are just as guilty as Mom. You both chose the optics over McKenna's life. Now move. He pushed Chloe gently aside, his focus settling entirely on his mother, who was still leaning against the wall, trying to deny the reality of the USB drive. You always worried about the legacy, Mother, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a conversational yet chilling tone. You always worried about who was in charge of the Henderson family name and the money. You spent decades telling me I was just a simple surgeon, a naive doctor who was too focused on saving lives to understand real business. He stepped closer to her. You thought you were the one in control. You hosted the parties. You managed the portfolio. You spent Father's money as if it were your divine right, all in the name of preserving the Henderson name. It was my right, Doris insisted, her voice trembling but defiant. It was the legacy Father and I built. You have no right to question me. You were too busy operating to understand finances. Did you ever ask yourself why Father chose me? The simple surgeon, to be the sole trustee of the entire family fund, Marcus asked, letting the question hang heavy in the air. Did you ever truly ask yourself why your late husband, the man whose image you worship, structured his will to give me total discretionary power over every single asset that pays your lavish allowance, instead of giving it to you, his capable, business-savvy wife? Doris's eyes darted frantically, her breathing shallow and ragged. The question was a poison she had been avoiding for years. Father knew you, Mother, Marcus continued, relentless. He knew your obsession with status and appearances would eventually consume you. He knew you would sacrifice anyone and anything to climb that social ladder. He knew you would put the Thorntons' validation over the lives of his own grandchildren. He cut you out of the control entirely, Mother, because you are a liability, not a leader. That's a lie, Doris gasped, pressing her hands against her temples. That's a lie. He trusted me. He loved me. He trusted me, Marcus corrected. And today your greed, your obsession, your choice to lock my wife in a bathroom has justified every single precaution he took. Doris looked completely destabilized, her manicured fingers flying to her throat. She fought desperately to grasp any thread of the reality she had so carefully constructed. No, she insisted, shaking her head violently. That's not how the Henderson family trust works. It's common property. It's shared. Your father and I agreed on the terms years ago. He trusted me to manage the estate. He trusted me to protect the legacy. She looked frantically at Chloe and Thomas, seeking validation. He trusted me. Marcus did not raise his voice. He kept his tone low and surgical. Wrong, Mother. It is not common property. It is not shared. The trust is irrevocable, and it is in my name. I am the sole trustee. You are legally only a salaried beneficiary. A salaried beneficiary? Doris repeated the words, tasting like ash. That's absurd. I am the matriarch. I host these events. I am the face of the family. And that is precisely why Father cut you out of the control. Marcus revealed, his voice a hammer blow. He knew your obsession with status. He saw how deeply you feared being seen as anything less than perfect. He knew you would squander the true wealth on lavish weddings, on parties for politicians, and on $5,000 handbags. He knew you would trade the family's financial stability just to preserve a social image. Marcus stepped closer, forcing her to confront the man she had dismissed. He saw that your vanity would be the ruin of us all. He trusted me, the doctor, because he knew I would prioritize the family's longevity over your ego. Doris tried to deny it, but her voice was a thin, panicked whisper. That's a lie. I built this life. I earned this. You earned his distrust, Marcus stated simply. And you earned the consequences that come with it. You just asked me why I am here. This is why. I am here to fulfill my father's mandate. He looked directly at Detective Hayes, then back at his mother. Mother, you always prioritized the image over the inconvenience. You prioritized a party over the life of your grandchild. And now you will finally understand the true cost of that choice. He pulled out his personal phone, tapping the screen once to show the account information. I called the family lawyer and the financial manager 10 minutes ago. Since you used your corporate credit cards to fund a personal wedding of this magnitude, all of which are technically managed by the Henderson Trust under my execution, I have invoked the moral turpitude clause. Doris's eyes bulged. Your salary has been immediately suspended. Your credit cards have been canceled. Your bank accounts tied to the trust have been frozen pending a full audit of the last 3 years. You have zero purchasing power left, Mother. You are instantly destitute. You have no resources to hire a lawyer to fight me. You have no money left to pay your bail. You are powerless. Doris stood frozen, her eyes wide, staring at Marcus's calm, resolute face. The color drained completely from her skin, transforming her into the visual spectacle promised by the teaser. The sheer terror of being instantly stripped of her wealth and power was a greater blow than the threat of jail. She tried to speak, but only a dry, rattling gasp escaped her throat. The matriarch of the Henderson family, the social queen of Buckhead, was financially annihilated. Marcus turned his cold gaze from his mother to his sister Chloe, who was already starting to hyperventilate. He had one last, devastating truth to deliver. You want to talk about the wedding, Chloe? Fine, let's talk about the wedding. Marcus's voice was quiet, deadly. The $500,000 wedding. The $50,000 dress. The private chartered jet for the honeymoon to Bora Bora. Chloe looked bewildered, clutching Thomas's arm. Marcus, those are already paid for. Mom wired the final payments last week. She paid for them with her corporate card and post-dated checks drawn on accounts I control, Marcus corrected. The accounts I just froze. The accounts I just closed. Congratulations on your marriage, Chloe. But your honeymoon is canceled, your vendors will not be paid, and your entire perfect wedding is about to fall apart publicly when the bank starts calling. Chloe stared at him, her denial dissolving into raw, animalistic panic. No, you can't. That's not fair. You can't do this to me. My life, my image. Thomas, Chloe's new husband, finally spoke, his voice laced with venom. He didn't look at McKenna or Doris. He glared at Chloe. You lied to me, he seethed. You lied about the money. You lied about your mother's control. You risked my reputation for a 5-hour party. He released her arm and stepped away, his own professional future collapsing around him. The chaos reached a breaking point. Doris let out a choked, desperate sound that was half sob and half scream, her knees buckling. She was done. She lost all pretense of being a dignified matriarch and simply crumpled. She collapsed onto the sterile hospital floor, her body unable to handle the simultaneous shock of her son's betrayal and her absolute financial ruin. Officer Hayes stepped forward immediately, his posture shifting from observation to official action. He placed his hand firmly on Marcus's shoulder. Dr. Henderson, thank you for your cooperation and the evidence. Detective Hayes is waiting for the file. And as for your mother, he looked down at the disgraced woman on the floor. Mrs. Doris Henderson, you are under arrest for felony kidnapping and reckless endangerment. We will need paramedics to move her. The police officer delivered the final crushing line. Thuba Doris Henderson, Babby Bat. The sheer shock of the arrest, delivered right there in the sterile hospital room, was only the beginning of Doris's undoing. Officer Hayes and the attending nurse had to physically lift the distraught woman from the floor. She was transported not to a high-end spa, but to the Fulton County Jail. The news broke like a tsunami the very next morning. The headline screaming across the digital pages of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution read in bold letters, "Buckhead matriarch arrested for felony kidnapping after locking pregnant daughter-in-law in bathroom." The entire facade of the perfect Henderson family collapsed within hours. The video evidence that Marcus had so meticulously secured proved to be the single most potent weapon against Doris. Her high-powered, quickly appointed defense attorney reviewed the footage and immediately advised the only viable legal strategy except a deal. The video was irrefutable. It showed not a mother's momentary panic, but a calculated, deliberate act of imprisonment fueled by selfish vanity. The prosecutor's office, sensing the high-profile media interest and the clear moral turpitude of the act, was ready to press charges of felony kidnapping and aggravated assault. They saw blood in the water. Doris, terrified of the public trial and the possibility of actual jail time which would destroy her status forever, fought the decision. Her lawyer, however, was relentless. He pointed out that the video contained her voice calmly lying to Chloe, while McKenna was screaming and bleeding. He convinced her that the only way to mitigate the disaster was to avoid a jury trial where the full, unedited video would be played for the world to see over and over again. She reluctantly agreed to a plea deal. The charges were reduced to reckless endangerment and false imprisonment. The sentence delivered was a swift, brutal dismantling of her social life. Doris Henderson, the society queen, was sentenced to 2 years of probation. She was required to complete 500 hours of court-mandated community service, ensuring she would have to perform manual labor for the very public she sought to impress. Most humiliatingly, she was ordered to undergo mandatory psychological evaluation and therapy to address her narcissistic and controlling behavior. The true punishment, however, was social. The same society that had clamored for her invitations now recoiled in horror. Her name was removed from the board of the prestigious Atlanta Arts Council. Her memberships to the most exclusive country clubs were quietly revoked. The society pages which had once documented her every flawless gala now dedicated columns to the sordid details of her arrest and sentencing. Her former friends and peers saw her not as the elegant matriarch, but as a convicted criminal who had endangered her own grandchild for the sake of a party. The punishment wasn't about the jail time she avoided. It was about the complete, irreparable destruction of the only thing Doris truly valued: her image. The Henderson name was no longer a symbol of elite status. It was a symbol of toxic cruelty and public shame. The Thornton family's reaction to the unfolding scandal was swift, cold, and entirely focused on preserving their own political image. Horrified by the public arrest of Doris and the news that the final wedding payments were bouncing due to Marcus's action, they immediately forced their son to annul the marriage. For them, the wedding was a failed business deal, and Chloe was a catastrophic liability. They called it a marriage built on lies and used their extensive legal team to erase the union completely. Chloe's newly acquired status and position within the Thornton dynasty vanished overnight. The financial collapse that followed was total. Chloe's vendors, furious about the bounced checks and the public scandal, began demanding payment, some threatening lawsuits. Without Doris's endless stream of money to hide the messes, Chloe was exposed as having little wealth of her own. Her $50,000 wedding dress was repossessed by the boutique. The Bora Bora honeymoon was canceled, the refunds seized by creditors. She had been living entirely off the image and the expectation of wealth provided by her mother. Now that wealth was minimal, controlled entirely by Marcus, who granted his mother only a small, tightly controlled monthly allowance. Chloe was forced to move out of the lavish new home she shared with her ex-husband and back to a modest apartment. Her carefully curated image as a lifestyle influencer was utterly destroyed. Her followers, who valued the illusion of seamless perfection, abandoned her in droves when her feed inevitably began to feature actual stress and lack of designer goods. She tried to pivot, attempting to use the scandal for attention, but the public saw her as a villain who had laughed while her sister-in-law was locked in a bathroom. Her comment sections became a toxic cesspool. The elite social circles she had worked so hard to enter turned their backs instantly. The Atlanta social scene did not forgive people who ruined high-status weddings, or people who were publicly exposed as being poor. Chloe, the golden child, who had thrived on attention, became a social pariah cut off from the very people whose approval she craved. Marcus's execution of his late father's mandate was cold, precise, and absolute. As the sole discretionary trustee of the Henderson family fortune, he held the power of life and ruin over his mother, and he did not hesitate to use it. Doris's financial privileges were not merely reduced, they were systematically dismantled. Marcus did not leave her destitute, as he provided a sufficient monthly stipend to cover basic living expenses, food, utilities, and minor necessities. But the amount was a fraction of what she was accustomed to, enough to survive, but absolutely insufficient to maintain the illusion of high society status. The shock of her new income level was catastrophic. Her annual membership fees for the Atlanta Arts Council and her exclusive country club went unpaid. The cost of maintaining the sprawling Buckhead mansion with its meticulous landscaping and costly utility bills quickly became untenable. She could no longer afford the staff, the house manager, the weekly cleaning crew, or the gardeners, all essential components of her carefully constructed image. The mansion, the very symbol of her success and control, rapidly became a financial prison she could not afford to keep. She resisted the inevitable for months, frantically calling lawyers and financial advisors, only to be repeatedly told that Marcus's control over the trust was ironclad. Her husband, Marcus's father, had left no loopholes for vanity. Finally, humiliatingly, she was forced to list the Buckhead estate. The sale became an open secret in Atlanta society, a visible, tangible symbol of her downfall. She sold the mansion not just to survive, but to escape the burden of its maintenance and the shame of its visibility. Doris moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment far from the prestigious zip codes she had once dictated. She traded her customized German SUV for a functional sedan. Her life became small, mundane, and utterly invisible to the social circles she had once dominated. The true punishment was the loss of her audience. She had spent a lifetime performing, and now the theater was empty. The most profound loss was the destruction of her relationship with Marcus. He maintained a respectful distance, ensuring her legal and basic financial needs were met, but nothing more. The warmth, the affection, the respect she craved was gone, replaced by the surgeon's cold assessment of her as a liability. She was the woman who had risked his wife and son for a cocktail party. Marcus did not hate her, he simply removed her. Doris lost everything that mattered to her: her high social status, her financial command, the symbol of her power, and the respect of her brilliant son. She was left only with her regrets, and the realization that the pursuit of perfection had cost her the very family she claimed to protect. Her ambition had been her ultimate ruin. Her punishment was complete. 6 months. 6 months of fear, recovery, and quiet, determined healing. The journey was long, but finally the moment arrived. McKenna stood in the sterile quiet of the Northside NICU, dressed not in a hospital gown, but in a comfortable earth-toned knit dress, her eyes shining with unshed tears of pure relief. Marcus stood beside her, his hand firmly on her shoulder, his gaze fixed on the tiny plastic bassinet. Their son Elijah was being carefully bundled by the head nurse for his final departure. Elijah, the name meaning, "My God is Jehovah," felt like a promise made and kept. He was no longer a fragile preemie fighting for every breath. He was a robust, healthy 6-month-old baby boy ready to go home. McKenna's recovery had mirrored Elijah's, slow, painstaking, but absolute. The physical trauma of the abruption and the emergency surgery had faded. The scar from the C-section was a faint white line, a permanent mark of the battle she had won. More profoundly, the psychological scar of the abandonment had begun to close. Marcus's unwavering support throughout the legal battle and Elijah's stay in the NICU had been her lifeline. He was no longer the weak man who prioritized his mother's approval. He was a father, a husband, and a protector. The nurse handed Elijah to Makina. The small weight of her son, warm and real in her arms, was the heaviest, most beautiful thing she had ever held. It was the ultimate, undeniable payoff. The drive away from the hospital was silent but peaceful. They weren't driving to the dark, oppressive grandeur of the Buckhead mansion. They drove to a new address, a place they had chosen together. Their new house was modern and flooded with light, perched on a quiet hill overlooking the city. It was built of clean lines and warm wood, designed for comfort and life, not for hosting political fundraisers and impressing senators. The stark white and cold marble of Doris's world were gone, replaced by soft, comfortable textures and McKenna's own vibrant African art collection. McKenna walked through the foyer, the quiet hum of the house wrapping around her like a warm blanket. She felt healthy, strong, and completely unburdened. The oppressive silence that had once haunted her old life was gone, replaced by the peaceful quiet of a home built on truth. Marcus came up behind her, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. "Welcome home, McKenna," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome home, Elijah." McKenna turned, leaning into her husband's strength. "It's perfect, Marcus." She smiled, looking around the bright open space. "It is entirely, wonderfully ours." She had not only reclaimed her life, she had built a better one, brick by determined brick, free from the shadow of the Henderson matriarch. The future felt not perfect but real and safe. The final piece of Marcus's self-reformation involved the family legacy itself. One quiet evening, after settling Elijah into his crib in their new, light-filled home, Marcus sat McKenna down in the living room. He didn't lead with the apologies he had already offered countless times. He led with action. "I listed the Buckhead house this week," Marcus said, simply taking her hand. "The mansion. It was finalized this afternoon." McKenna felt a wave of profound relief wash over her. That house, the symbol of Doris's absolute power and their years of subjugation, held too many shadows. "Thank you, Marcus. That house held too many bad memories. It never felt like home anyway." Marcus nodded grimly. "It was never ours. It was Mother's stage for her performance. And I am done paying rent on her drama." The sale of the physical symbol of the Henderson legacy was the necessary first step. The second was the investment. Marcus then told her about the rest of the capital from the sale money that he, as the sole trustee, now controlled entirely. "I've liquidated Father's non-performing assets and restructured the portfolio, and I want to do something that should have been done 2 years ago." McKenna looked at him, curious. "I transferred $5 million into a new account this morning," Marcus announced, watching her reaction carefully. "It's the seed money for your company, your medtech startup. It's yours, completely clean, completely funded, and completely controlled by you." McKenna gasped, pulling her hand away in shock. $5 million, Marcus, that's impossible. That's the core fund." "No," he corrected, his voice firm. "That is the profit derived from the core fund, and you are the most competent person I know to manage it. You are brilliant, McKenna. You worked on that business plan while pregnant and managing a full-time job. You did all that with Mother constantly telling you it was just a hobby." She mocked the word app. "Well, now that app has $5 million of capital to become the industry leader it deserves to be." He stood up and knelt before her, his hands resting gently on her knees. This was his true confession, his most profound apology. "I should have done this a long time ago. I should have stood up to my mother then. I should have invested in you and defended you in front of the entire family. My silence was a betrayal, Kina, and I am so sorry for that. My life was easier when I let her control things." McKenna reached down, touching his face. His sincerity was palpable. You don't have to apologize anymore, Marcus. You risked your career and your mother's legacy to save me and Elijah. That's all the apology I need. No, he insisted, shaking his head. My job as your husband starts now truly. My job is to protect you and to empower you. And I want you to know this, I am not just funding your company. I am investing entirely in you. I want you to take that $5 million and build an empire. Show them exactly what they tried to destroy. Show them what real strength looks like. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a love that was finally completely free of his mother's control. I will invest in you from now on, in every sense of the word. The office space was magnificent. It occupied a gleaming corner suite overlooking the Atlanta skyline, its walls constructed entirely of glass. This was not the tiny borrowed desk space where McKenna had first scribbled out her business plan. This was the headquarters of a thriving medtech company. The room buzzed with the low-focused energy of a growing successful firm. McKenna sat at her custom desk, not in the tailored severity of a suit, but in comfortable clothes reviewing financial projections that reflected exponential growth. Beside her desk, near a large window where the sun streamed in, stood a sleek modern bassinet. Inside, Elijah, 6 months old, slept soundly, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. The sight of her son, healthy and strong, was McKenna's constant quiet reminder of the miracle she had fought for. The door opened softly and Marcus walked in. He looked completely transformed. Gone were the tight shoulders and the strained expression of the overworked surgeon tethered to his mother's expectations. He wore a simple cashmere sweater and carried 2 mugs. He was relaxed, focused, and present. He was her true partner. He placed a mug of coffee on her desk and leaned down to gently kiss Elijah's forehead before settling into the chair across from her. The updates from the legal team are clean, he said. Doris settled her bond yesterday, and the best news. What is it? McKenna asked, looking up from her tablet. The meeting with the investment group in Silicon Valley has been confirmed for next week. They reviewed our projections, and they are deeply impressed with your technology. McKenna smiled, a look of quiet triumph crossing her face. My technology, you mean? Marcus shook his head instantly. No, I mean our technology. I am the chief medical officer. Remember, my input is critical. He grinned. The Silicon Valley team specifically noted that our partnership, the combination of clinical expertise and marketing innovation, is what makes the business model unique. They said they're eager to invest. McKenna laughed, the sound light and genuine. Eager to invest in the app Mother called a hobby. Marcus reached across the desk, covering her hand with his own. They are eager to invest in the strength and resilience of the woman who designed it. They're investing in you, McKenna, in your fight. McKenna looked at her hands, then at her husband, then at Elijah. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the magnitude of her victory, a victory not of revenge, but of life, sink in. She had fought Doris's toxic definition of family and status and won on every battlefield, legal, financial, and maternal. Her victory was standing here, breathing in this sunlight, holding the hand of the man who had finally chosen her, and hearing the soft breaths of the son she had saved. She had everything: a thriving business built on her own talent, a husband who was now truly supportive, and a healthy child who represented a clean new legacy. Her story wasn't about the trauma she survived. It was about the empire she built from the wreckage. She had won. The ultimate lesson from this narrative is that true value is determined by self-worth, not by others' perception. McKenna's journey underscores that familial toxicity thrives on maintaining a false narrative of control and inadequacy. When faced with extreme betrayal, the most powerful response is not to beg for a seat at the table, but to build a new, stronger table. Justice is found not just in the punishment of the cruel, but in the financial and emotional liberation achieved by refusing to be controlled. Marcus's change of heart highlights that silent complicity is a form of betrayal. True love requires active defense and empowerment. The greatest wealth is autonomy. Share this story if you believe that boundaries are the foundations of respect.